The morning sun filtered to the kitchen windows of my two-story colonial home in suburban Pittsburgh, casting golden rays across the breakfast table where I'd shared countless meals with my family over the past 30 years. I was preparing my usual coffee when I heard Marcus's car pull into the driveway earlier than expected for our Saturday morning routine. At 73, I still maintain my independence quite well. Thank you very much. Sure, my arthritis acted up during the Pennsylvania winters, and I needed reading glasses for the newspaper, but I was far from helpless. I'd raised Marcus as a single father after his mother passed when he was just 12, worked double shifts at the steel mill to put him through college, and helped him start his accounting firm. Now, at 45, he was more successful than I'd ever dreamed possible. "Dad, we need to talk," Marcus said as he entered the kitchen, his usually warm brown eyes avoiding mine. Behind him stood Emma, his fiancée of 2 years, a polished woman in her early 30s with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Good morning to you too, son," I chuckled, pouring him a cup of coffee. "Emma, would you like some?" I was just about to start on some pancakes. "Actually, Mr. Thompson," Emma interrupted, her voice carrying that practiced sweetness she used when she wanted something, "we're here about something important. Marcus has something to discuss with you." The air in the kitchen suddenly felt heavier. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, straightening his expensive tie, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Dad, Emma and I have been talking, and with the wedding next month, well, we think it's time to consider your living situation." "My living situation?" I set down my coffee mug, the ceramic clinking against the counter harder than I intended. "What's wrong with my living situation? I've lived in this house for 3 decades, Marcus. It's where you grew up, where your mother and I built our life together." Emma stepped forward, her manicured hand resting on Marcus's arm. "We understand this is emotional, but you're getting older. What if something happens when no one's around? What if you fall or have a medical emergency?" "I'm 73, not 93. I replied, feeling heat rise in my chest. "I walk 3 miles every morning. I volunteer at a community center twice a week. And I beat you at chess last Sunday, Marcus. Remember?" My son finally looked at me directly, and I saw something in his expression that made my stomach drop. This wasn't a suggestion or a gentle conversation about the future. This was a decision that had already been made. "Dad, we found a really nice place," Marcus said quietly. "Sunset Manor. It's got activities, medical staff on site, and other people your age. You won't be lonely." Lonely? The word hit me like a physical blow. "Son, I'm not lonely. I have my neighbors, my volunteer work, my garden, Mrs. Patterson next door, and I have coffee every Tuesday. I play poker with the guys from my old job every Friday night." "But you'll make new friends," Emma chimed in, her voice taking on that patronizing tone people use with children and the elderly. "And you won't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore. Think of how freeing that will be." I looked around my kitchen at the pencil marks on the doorframe measuring Marcus's height as he grew, at the photo of his mother on the windowsill, at the table where he'd done his homework, while I helped him with math problems after my long shifts. This wasn't just a house. It was a repository of our family's history. When I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, Marcus and Emma exchanged a glance. "Today," he said, "we've already packed some of your things. The movers will handle the rest next week." The room started to spin slightly. "Today? Marcus, your wedding is in 3 weeks. You're putting me in a nursing home 3 weeks before your wedding." "It's not a nursing home. It's assisted living," Emma corrected, as if the terminology made any difference. "And it's better to get you settled before the wedding stress. This way, you'll be comfortable and taken care of, and Marcus won't have to worry about you during what should be the happiest time of our lives." Our lives. Not his life or our family's life, but their life. I wasn't part of their equation anymore. "I don't understand," I said, gripping the edge of the counter. "We never discussed this. You never asked how I felt about it. You just decided." Marcus's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the stubborn child he'd once been. "Dad, you're being dramatic. People your age do this all the time. It's normal. It's practical. Practical for whom? The words came out sharper than I intended. Practical for you and Emma to have your perfect little newlywed life without having to check on your old father? Practical to sell the house, and I stopped as realization hit me. You're selling the house. Neither of them denied it. The market's really good right now, Emma said, not even having the decency to look ashamed. And the money from the sale will more than cover the costs of Sunset Manor. You'll be financially secure. I stared at my son, this man I'd sacrificed everything for, who I'd loved unconditionally through every stage of his life, and saw a stranger. When had he become someone who could discard me like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit his decor? Get out, I said quietly. Dad, get out. The words erupted from somewhere deep in my chest, carrying 30 years of love, disappointment, and betrayal. If you want to put me away like some unwanted dog, then do it. But don't stand in my kitchen and tell me it's for my own good. Don't insult my intelligence and my dignity by pretending this is about anything other than your convenience. Marcus's face flushed red. Fine, be stubborn, but we're not changing our minds. The arrangements are made. We'll be back in an hour to take you to Sunset Manor. As they left, Emma's heels clicking decisively on my hardwood floors, I stood alone in my kitchen for what I now realized would be the last time. The morning sun still streamed through the windows, but the warmth had gone out of it. I walked slowly to my bedroom and pulled out the small suitcase Marcus had apparently packed for me. Inside were clothes chosen by someone who didn't know that I preferred my blue cardigan to the gray one, or that I always wore my father's watch, the one that wasn't in the suitcase, because Emma probably thought it looked too old and worn. As I sat on the edge of the bed where my wife had died 15 years ago, where I comforted Marcus through nightmares and helped him prepare for his first job interview, I made a decision of my own. If Marcus wanted to treat me like I was already dead, then perhaps it was time to act accordingly. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. Helena? I said when my granddaughter answered. It's Grandpa. I need to see you today. It's important. The fluorescent lights in the hallway of Sunset Manor buzzed with that persistent hum that reminded me of the factory where I'd spent most of my working life. But unlike the factory, where the noise meant productivity and purpose, here it just felt like the soundtrack to waiting, waiting for meals, waiting for activities, waiting for visitors who might never come, waiting for the end. My apartment was a generous term for what amounted to a hotel room with a kitchenette I wasn't supposed to use because of safety protocols. The walls were painted that particular shade of beige that interior designers probably called warm putty, but struck me as the color of giving up. Through my single window, I could see the parking lot, and beyond that, a strip mall with a pharmacy, a Dollar General, and a Chinese restaurant with a flickering neon sign. It had been a week since Marcus and Emma dropped me off like a package they'd finally gotten around to mailing. A week of scheduled meal times, mandatory social hours, and the constant hovering of staff who called me sweetie and spoke to me like I was 5 years old. Mr. Thompson, it's time for evening medications, chirped Brenda, a 20-something nursing assistant with pink scrubs and an unnaturally cheerful disposition. She held out a small paper cup with 2 pills, one for blood pressure, one for cholesterol, medications I'd been managing perfectly well on my own for years. Thank you, Brenda, I said, taking the pills and the cup of water she offered. As soon as she left, I walked to my small bathroom and spit them into the sink. I wasn't about to start giving up control of my own body just because my son had given up on me. The knock on my door came at precisely 9:30 p.m., just after evening quiet time had begun. I opened it to find Helena standing in the hallway, her long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and her college backpack slung over one shoulder. At 22, she had her grandmother's gentle eyes and her grandfather's stubborn chin. "Grandpa," she whispered, glancing nervously down the hall. "I signed in as your granddaughter visiting for the evening. I told them you were expecting me." I pulled her into my room and closed the door softly. Helena was a senior at Carnegie Mellon, studying social work, a choice that had made Marcus roll his eyes because it wasn't practical or financially smart. But I'd been proud of her decision to work with people who needed advocates, even if I hadn't understood until now just how much I might need one myself. "I brought what you asked for," she said, pulling a manila folder from her backpack. "Are you sure about this, Grandpa? I mean, I understand why you're upset, but this is really serious." I took the folder containing my updated with the one I'd had my lawyer, Frank Morrison, draw up the day after I'd been deposited at Sunset Manor. Frank had known me for 20 years, had handled my wife's estate and various legal matters over the years, and when I'd called him from the payphone in the Sunset Manor lobby, because apparently my room phone couldn't make outside calls without permission, he'd agreed to meet me at his office that very afternoon. "Helena, let me ask you something," I said, settling into room's single armchair while she sat on the edge of my bed. "When your father was growing up, do you know how many times I missed his school plays because I was working overtime to pay for his college?" She shook her head. "7. 7 times I missed seeing him on stage because I was pulling double shifts. Do you know how many family vacations we never took because every extra penny went into his college fund?" "Grandpa, I sold my father's 1967 Mustang, a car I dreamed of restoring with Marcus someday to pay for his graduate school. I wore the same winter coat for 15 years, so he could have new clothes for job interviews." I opened the folder and looked at the legal documents inside. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me, sweetheart. I'm telling you because those weren't sacrifices. They were investments in love. They were what you do for family." Helena's eyes were bright, with unshed tears. "I know, Grandpa. And Dad knows, too, somewhere inside. He's just... Emma has this way of making him think that anything that isn't about their perfect life together is somehow holding them back." "Tell me about the wedding planning," I said, changing the subject because I could see how much this was hurting her, too. Helena sighed and kicked off her sneakers, curling her legs under on the bed like she used to do when she was little and would come to me with her problems. "It's insane, Grandpa. Emma has a color-coded spreadsheet for everything. She's spending more on flowers than most people spend on a car. And she keeps talking about how the wedding photos need to be perfect, which apparently means not having anyone in them who might look too old or detract from the aesthetic." The pieces clicked into place. She didn't want me at the wedding. She never said that directly, but Helena hesitated. Last week, she made a comment about how wedding photographers charge extra for extensive retouching and how some people just don't photograph well anymore. I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, not from my heart condition, but from the weight of understanding just how thoroughly I'd been erased from my son's life. And Marcus said nothing? Dad just nods along with whatever Emma wants. It's like he's afraid that if he disagrees with her about anything, she'll leave. Helena's voice was thick with frustration. "But Grandpa, abandoning you isn't going to make their marriage stronger. It's just going to create a wound that never heals." I looked at my granddaughter, this wise, compassionate young woman who understood something about family that her father had forgotten, and made my final decision. "Helena, I need you to do something for me, and I need you to promise you won't tell your father until after the wedding." She straightened up, her expression growing serious. "What is it?" I handed her the folder. "I want you to keep this safe. Inside, you'll find my new will. I've left everything to you, the house sale proceeds, my savings, my life insurance, everything. But more importantly, I've included letters. One for your father, one for Emma, and one for you." Helena's hands trembled as she took the folder. "Grandpa, I can't accept this. The money should go to Dad. He's your son." "Helena, money is just paper and numbers in a bank account. What matters is what it represents." I reached out and took her hand. "Your father chose to treat me like a burden to be disposed of. He chose to prioritize his comfort over my dignity. Those are his choices, and choices have consequences. But what if he realizes what he's done? What if he wants to make things right? Then he'll have to find a way to do that without expecting financial reward for basic human decency." I squeezed her hand gently. "Sweetheart, I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing this because you're the one who came to visit me. You're the one who calls to check on me. You're the one who remembers that I'm still a person with feelings and dreams and stories to tell." Helena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the folder in her lap. "The letter for Dad, what does it say?" "It tells him everything I wish I could have said to his face. It tells him about the sacrifices I made gladly, about the love I felt every single day raising him, and about how deeply he's hurt me. But it also tells him that I hope someday he'll understand what he's lost, and that when he does, he'll remember that love isn't something you can just pick up and put down when it's convenient. And Emma's letter? I smiled grimly. Emma's letter is much shorter. It simply explains that actions have consequences, and that turning a son against his father is not something I'll reward in my will. Helena tucked the folder into her backpack, her movements careful and deliberate. When do you want me to give these to them? After the wedding. Let them have their perfect day. Let them have their perfect photos and their perfect honeymoon. But when they come back and start planning their perfect life with my house money, that's when they'll learn that some prices are too high to pay. As Helena prepared to leave, she hugged me tighter than she had since she was a little girl. I love you, Grandpa, and I'm going to figure out a way to get you out of here. I love you too, sweetheart. But don't worry about me. I'm tougher than I look, and I'm far from finished with this story. After she left, I sat in my beige room listening to the buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of late-night television from other rooms. Tomorrow, Marcus would marry Emma in a ceremony I wouldn't attend, surrounded by people who wouldn't even know I existed. They would dance and celebrate and plan their future with money that would never come. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't felt since the morning Marcus walked into my kitchen. I felt like I had some power left in this story. And sometimes, that's all you need to change everything. The morning of Marcus's wedding dawned crisp and clear, one of those perfect October days in Pittsburgh when the autumn leaves seemed to glow like stained glass windows. From my room at Sunset Manor, I could see families walking to the nearby park. Children chasing each other through piles of leaves, couples holding hands, as they enjoyed the kind of simple happiness that doesn't require color-coded spreadsheets or extensive planning. I'd been awake since 5 a.m., not because of excitement, but because sleep had become elusive in this place where every sound was foreign and every routine belonged to someone else. The breakfast tray had come and gone, rubbery eggs and toast that tasted like cardboard, and now I sat in my armchair, watching the world continue outside my window, wondering if my son ever thought about me on what should have been one of the most important days of his life. Helena had texted me the night before. Wedding is at 2 p.m. Wish you were going to be there. I love you, Grandpa. I'd stared at that message for a long time, imagining what the day might have been like if things had gone differently. I would have walked Marcus's mother's ring down the aisle to be blessed, or given a toast about watching my boy become a man, or danced with Helena to some song that would have made us both laugh. Instead, I was sitting in a nursing home that smelled like disinfectant and defeat, wearing my best shirt and tie for no one but myself, because some small part of me refused to let this day pass unmarked. Around noon, there was a soft knock on my door. I expected to see Brenda with my lunch medications, but instead found Mrs. Adelaide Foster, my across-the-hall neighbor. Adelaide was 86, sharp as a tack, and had been at Sunset Manor for 3 years since her daughter moved her here from Philadelphia. "Harold," she said, using my first name like she always did, "you look like you're dressed for something special." "My son's wedding is today," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Adelaide's eyebrows rose. "And you're here?" I'd told her pieces of my story over the past week during our conversations in the common room, but not the whole truth. Now, looking at this woman who'd been abandoned by her own family and somehow maintained her dignity through it all, I found myself telling her everything. Adelaide listened without interrupting, her weather hands folded in her lap, her bright blue eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Harold," she finally said, "I've been in this place for 3 years. Do you know how many weddings, graduations, birthdays, and holidays I've missed because my daughter thinks I'm too frail to travel?" I shook my head. 17 major family events. 17 times I could have been there to celebrate with the people I love, to be part of their joy, to contribute something meaningful to their memories. She stood up slowly and walked to my window. "But do you know what I've learned?" "What?" "I've learned that being discarded doesn't diminish your worth, it reveals theirs." She turned back to me. "Your son is making the biggest mistake of his life today, Harold, not just by marrying that woman, but by doing it without the man who raised him, who sacrificed for him, who loved him unconditionally for 45 years. But he doesn't see it that way. Not today. But someday he will. And when that day comes, how you handle this moment will determine whether there's anything left to rebuild. Adelaide's voice was gentle but firm. Don't let the mistake turn you into someone you're not proud to be. After she left, I sat thinking about her words. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the wedding preparations probably happening at the Omni William Penn Hotel downtown, the venue Emma had insisted on, because it photographed better than the small church where Marcus had been baptized and where his mother and I had been married. At 2:00 exactly, I stood up and walked to my small dresser. From the top drawer, I pulled out my wife's wedding ring, the one I'd worn on a chain around my neck since she died. I'd planned to give it to Marcus on his wedding day, to tell him about the love his mother and I had shared and how I hope he'd find that same deep, abiding partnership. Instead, I fastened the chain around my neck and tucked the ring beneath my shirt, close to my heart where it belonged. At 3:15, my phone rang. Helena, Grandpa. Her voice was tight with emotion. The ceremony just ended. How was it? Beautiful, I guess. Emma looked perfect. Dad looked, I don't know, happy, but also like something was missing. She paused. He kept looking toward the back of the church during the ceremony, like he was expecting someone to walk in. I closed my eyes. And Emma? She was radiant. Everything was exactly like she planned. The photos are going to be gorgeous. Helena's voice carried a note of bitterness. But Grandpa, during the reception, Aunt Susan asked Dad where you were. Emma jumped in and said you were under the weather and couldn't travel. Under the weather? I almost laughed at the euphemism. I want to say something, but I remembered what you asked me to do. The letters are safe. Grandpa, I'll deliver them next week when they get back from their honeymoon in Italy. After Helena hung up, I sat in my room as the afternoon faded into evening. Somewhere across the city, my son was dancing with his new wife, cutting cake, accepting congratulations from friends and family who would go home tonight and tell their own children to cherish their parents while they had them. Around 8 p.m., there was another knock on my door. This time it was Brenda, but she wasn't carrying medications. Mr. Thompson, there's someone here to see you. My heart jumped. Had Marcus come? Had he realized what day it was and driven here still in his wedding tuxedo to share some part of his happiness with me? But when I reached the common room, I found Frank Morrison, my lawyer, waiting with concerned expression on his weathered face. Harold, he said, standing to shake my hand. I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I was in the neighborhood after a client dinner and thought I'd check on you. We found a quiet corner of the common room, away from the television, where several residents were watching the evening news. How are you holding up? Frank asked. I have to tell you, in 30 years of practicing law, I've never had a client make the kind of changes to their will that you made last week. Are you certain about this decision? I looked around the common room at Adelaide playing solitaire by herself, at Mr. Peterson staring blankly at the television, at Mrs. Chin sitting alone by the window, even though her large family lived less than 20 minutes away. Frank, when I die, what will Marcus remember about me? Harold, that's a dark question for a Saturday evening. Humor me. Frank considered this. Well, he'll remember that you raised him alone after Patricia died. He'll remember that you worked hard to provide for him, that you supported his education and his career. Will he remember that I loved him? Of course he will. Will he? Or will he remember that love as something conditional, something that came with expectations and obligations? I leaned forward in my chair. Frank, my son put me in a nursing home so I wouldn't interfere with his perfect wedding. He's forgotten that love isn't something you schedule around your convenience. And you think changing your will is going to teach him that lesson? I think changing my will is going to ensure that someone who still understands loves someone who visited me here, who called to check on me, who cried when she heard what her father had done, is the one who benefits from a lifetime of love I freely gave. Frank was quiet for a moment. You know, Harold, there's still time to change it back. If you have second thoughts after the reality of what you've done sets in, the only second thoughts I have are whether I should have done this sooner. I stood up and walked to the window that looked out over the parking lot. My son chose his new life over his old one. That's his right. but he doesn't get to inherit the benefits of a relationship he was willing to discard. As Frank left, he handed me his business card again. If you change your mind, Harold, any time, day or night. I tucked the card into my shirt pocket, knowing I'd never use it. Tonight, while Marcus and Emma were celebrating the beginning of their new life together, I was celebrating something too, the end of my willingness to accept less love than I'd given. Tomorrow, they would fly to Italy for 2 weeks of honeymoon bliss. And when they returned, tan and happy and ready to start spending the inheritance they assumed was waiting for them, they would discover that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. 3 weeks after Marcus and Emma returned from their honeymoon in Tuscany, tanned, relaxed, and full of stories about wine tastings and Renaissance art, Helena called me from the parking lot of their new house in the upscale Shadyside neighborhood. "Grandpa," she said, her voice tight with nervous energy, "I'm about to go in. Are you sure you want me to do this today?" Through my window at Sunset Manor, I could see the first snow of the season beginning to fall, coating the parking lot and the strip mall beyond in a thin layer of white that made everything look clean and new. It had been 2 months since Marcus had dropped me here, and in that time, I'd established a routine that had nothing to do with the scheduled activities and everything to do with maintaining my sense of self. I woke early and did exercises by my window. I befriended Adelaide and 2 other residentes, Mr. Jimmy Washington, a retired steelworker like myself, and Mrs. Dorothy Kim, a former teacher whose family visited every Sunday without fail. We'd formed our own small community within the larger institution, playing cards, sharing stories, and maintaining each other's dignity in small but important ways. "Helena, sweetheart, are you ready for this?" I asked, because once you hand over those letters, there's no going back. "I've been ready, Grandpa. It's just—" She paused, and I could hear her taking a deep breath. "I keep thinking about Christmas morning when I was 8, and Dad was so excited to give you that tie with the fishing lures on it. He'd save his allowance for 2 months to buy it. He was so proud when you wore it to church the next Sunday." The memory hit me like a physical blow. I remembered that tie, remembered how Marcus's face had lit up when I told him it was the most beautiful tie I'd ever owned. I'd worn it to every important occasion for years, until it finally fell apart. "Helena, that little boy is still in there somewhere," I said quietly, "but he's been buried under years of Emma's influence and his own selfishness. Maybe these letters will help him find his way back to who he used to be. Or maybe they won't. But either way, it's time for the truth. Okay, Grandpa, I'm going in. I love you. I love you too, sweetheart. Call me tonight and tell me how it went." After Helena hung up, I sat in my chair and waited. I'd been waiting for this moment for 2 months, and now that it was here, I felt strangely calm. Whatever happened next was out of my hands. Helena had told me about their homecoming, how Marcus and Emma had spent their first week back looking at the real estate listings for my house, discussing renovations they wanted to make to their current home with the inheritance money, and planning their next vacation to celebrate Emma's upcoming birthday. They'd been living as if my money was already in their bank account, as if I was already dead and my life's work was theirs to spend. At 4:30 that afternoon, my room phone rang. "Dad." Marcus's voice was strained, confused. "Helena, just—" She brought some papers. She said they were from you. Is this some kind of joke? I'd imagined this conversation 100 times, but now that it was happening, I found my throat dry and my heart racing. "Hello, Marcus. How is Italy?" Don't change the subject. This can't be real." "It's real, son. Frank Morrison drew up the day after you brought me here." There was a long silence. In the background, I could hear Emma's voice, sharp and demanding. "What does it say?" "Marcus, what does it will say?" "You left everything to Helena," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The house, your savings, a life insurance, everything." "That's correct. But I'm your son. I'm your only child." "Yes, you are, and I loved you more than my own life for 45 years. But being someone's child doesn't entitle you to treat them like a burden and still expect to inherit the rewards of their love." Emma's voice got louder in the background. "Let me talk to him. This is insane. He can't do this. Actually, Emma, I can do this. And I have done this. I kept my voice steady and calm. You wanted me out of your life, so I've granted your wish completely. Marcus's voice cracked. Dad, we didn't want you out of our lives. We just thought the nursing home seemed like the best option for everyone. For everyone? Marcus, did you ask me what I thought was the best option? Did you ask me how I felt about leaving the home where I raised you, where your mother died, where we celebrated every Christmas and birthday of your childhood? We thought you'd be safer. You thought you'd be more comfortable. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to my window, watching the snow fall more heavily now. Marcus, do you remember when you were 16 and you wanted to quit the debate team because some of the other kids were making fun of you? What does that have to do with anything? Do you remember what I told you? A pause. You said that when people try to make you smaller, you have two choices. You can shrink to fit their expectations, or you can stand tall and show them what you're really made of. That's right. And do you remember what you chose? I stayed on the team. We won the state championship that year. You did, and I was so proud of you. Not because you won, but because you chose not to let other people diminish you. I sat back down, feeling suddenly exhausted. But somewhere along the way, Marcus, you forgot that lesson. You let Emma convince you that I was an embarrassment, a burden, something that needed to be hidden away so your life could look perfect. Emma had apparently grabbed the phone. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. This is ridiculous. We've been planning our future based on that inheritance. We've made commitments, financial decisions. Emma, let me ask you something. In the 2 years you've been with my son, how many times have you had dinner in my home? What is that? How many times have you asked me about Marcus's childhood, or about his mother, or about our family history? Silence. How many times have you visited me here at Sunset Manor? We've been busy with the wedding and... The answer is 0, Emma. 0 times. You treated me like a piece of old furniture that didn't match your decor, and now you're upset that the furniture came with conditions you didn't read. Marcus took the phone back. Dad, please. Can we work this out? Can we talk about this like adults? We could have talked about it like adults 2 months ago, before you made a unilateral decision about my life. We could have talked about it like adults if you'd included me in your wedding, or visited me even once since you put me here, or treated me like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. But I'm still your son. Yes, Marcus, you are, and that's why this hurts so much. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes for the first time since the day they brought me here. Do you know what I've learned about family during my time at Sunset Manor? What? I've learned that blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Respect does. Showing up does. Helena has shown me more love and respect in the past 2 months than you have. She's earned the right to inherit what I built. Grandpa Harold? Helena's voice came through the phone, and I realized she'd been there listening to the whole conversation. Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Are you okay? I am now. Dad, Emma, I think you should read the letters Grandpa wrote. Really read them. Not just the legal stuff, but the personal letters. Emma's voice was sharp. What letters? There's a letter for each of you, Helena explained. Grandpa wrote down everything he wanted to say, but couldn't. Maybe if you read them, you'll understand why he made this decision. After they hung up, I sat in my room as the evening settled around me. The snow was falling steadily now, transforming the view outside my window into something beautiful and clean. For the first time in 2 months, I felt like I could breathe freely. At 8 o'clock, my phone rang again. This time it was Helena, and she was crying. Grandpa, she sobbed, I just finished reading your letter to Dad. The one about how you sold Grandma's jewelry to pay for his college textbooks, and how you never told him because you didn't want him to feel guilty. And the part about how you used to sit outside his bedroom door when he had nightmares after Grandma died, just listening to make sure he was okay. I closed my eyes, remembering those long nights when Marcus was 12 and 13, when grief would wake him up screaming, and I would stand in the hallway, my own heart breaking, waiting until his breathing returned to normal before I could sleep myself. Did he read it? He's reading it now. Emma, Emma read hers and left. She just got in her car and drove away. But Dad is sitting at the kitchen table with your letter. And Grandpa, he's crying like I haven't seen him cry since Grandma's funeral. 2 hours later, at nearly 10 p.m., there was a commotion in the hallway outside my room. I could hear Brenda's voice, firm but polite. "Sir, visiting hours ended at 9. You'll need to come back tomorrow." "Please," came a voice I'd know anywhere, thick with tears and desperation. "Please, I need to see my father. I know I don't deserve it, but I need to see him." I opened my door to find Marcus standing in the hallway, still wearing his expensive suit, but looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. His hair was messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. His tie was loose, and his eyes were red and swollen from crying. "It's okay, Brenda," I said quietly. "He can come in." Marcus followed me into my small room, and for a moment, we just stood there looking at each other. This was the man I'd raised, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike and help with homework and held when his mother died. But he was also the man who'd abandoned me without a second thought. "Dad," he said finally, his voice barely audible, "I read your letter, and I didn't know about Mom's jewelry, about the extra shifts, about—" He collapsed into my chair, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't know you sat outside my room when I had nightmares. You weren't supposed to know. That's what parents do, Marcus. We carry the weight so our children don't have to." He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. The vulnerable boy he'd once been. "I failed you, didn't I? I became someone you couldn't be proud of." I sat down on the edge of my bed, suddenly feeling every one of my 73 years. "Marcus, I've never stopped being proud of who you became professionally. You're successful, you're respected. You've built a good life for yourself. But somewhere along the way, you forgot where you came from. You forgot that the people who love you aren't obstacles to your happiness. They're the foundation of it." Emma said. He stopped and shook his head. "It doesn't matter what Emma said. I'm a 45-year-old man, and I let someone else convince me that my father was a burden instead of a blessing. Where's Emma now?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Gone. She read your letter and said this was all too much drama for her. She said if I chose you over her, our marriage was over before it really began." He looked around my small room, taking in the beige walls and the single window. "She was right about one thing, though. I did choose. I chose wrong, and now I don't know how to fix it." "Marcus, do you remember the first fish you ever caught?" He looked confused by the change of subject. "We were at Lake Erie. I was 8. It was just a small bass, but I thought it was the biggest fish in the world. Do you remember what I said when you wanted to throw it back because you felt sorry for it?" A small smile crossed his face for the first time. "You said that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let something go. But first you have to decide if you're letting it go because you truly love it or because you're afraid to take responsibility for it." "That's right. And what did you decide about the fish?" "I kept it. We cooked it for dinner that night, and you told me that taking responsibility for something means honoring its sacrifice by not wasting it." I nodded. "Marcus, I'm not asking you to choose between Emma and me, but I am asking you to decide what kind of man you want to be. The kind who honors the sacrifices made for him, or the kind who discards them when they become inconvenient." Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. "Dad, if I could change the last 2 months, if I could go back and handle things differently, but you can't. And even if you could, what matters is what you do now, what you do tomorrow, what you do with the rest of your life." "The will," he said suddenly. "You could change it back. Helena doesn't need the money. She's young. She'll build her own life. But we had plans, Dad. Emma and we were going to... Emma left you tonight. Marcus, what plans are left?" The words hit him like a physical blow. He doubled over in the chair, and I heard him make a sound I hadn't heard since he was a child. The deep, wrenching sob of someone whose world has just collapsed. "I lost everything," he whispered. "My wife, my father, my inheritance. I lost everything because I was too stupid and selfish to see what I had." I got up from the bed and walked to him, placing my hand on his shoulder the way I had when he was small, and the world seemed too big and scary to handle alone. Marcus, you didn't lose me because of the will. You lost me the day you decided I was disposable. The money was never the point. He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face. Then what was the point, Dad? What do you want from me? I want you to remember who raised you. I want you to remember that love isn't something you put on a shelf when it becomes inconvenient. I want you to visit me not because you want your inheritance back, but because I'm your father and you miss me. I sat back down across from him. I want you to be the man I thought I was raising. And if I do that, if I become that man again, will you forgive me? I looked at my son, this middle-aged man who was crying like the boy he'd once been, and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something like hope. Marcus, forgiveness isn't something you earn back. It's something you accept and then prove you're worthy of through your actions. I reached into my shirt and pulled out my wife's wedding ring on his chain. Your mother would have been heartbroken to see what happened between us, but she also would have believed that it's never too late for love to win. He stared at the ring. I was supposed to give that to Emma on our wedding day, wasn't I? Yes, but Emma never understood what it represented. Maybe someday you'll find someone who does. Marcus stayed until almost midnight, and we talked more honestly than we had in years. He told me about the pressure he'd felt to live up to Emma's expectations, about how he gradually convinced himself that my simple life and old-fashioned values were somehow embarrassing. I told him about the loneliness of the past 2 months, but also about the friends I'd made and the ways I'd learned to find dignity, even in a place designed to strip it away. When he finally left, he hugged me for the first time since I'd been a teenager, a real hug, not the polite embrace we'd shared at holidays. Dad, he said at the door, I know I don't have a right to ask this, but can I come back tomorrow? Marcus, you never needed the right to visit your father. You just needed to remember that you wanted to. After he left, I called Helena to tell her about our conversation. She cried again, this time with relief and hope. Grandpa, does this mean you'll change your back? I looked around my small room at Sunset Manor, thinking about the choice I'd made and what it had accomplished. Helena, that will stand as written. But it was never really about the money. It was about teaching your father what love actually costs and what happens when you take it for granted. But if he's learned that lesson, then he'll prove it through his actions, not through his inheritance. The money is yours, sweetheart. You've earned it through love and loyalty. But your father has the chance to earn something much more valuable. What's that? The chance to be the man his mother and I always believed he could be. And sometimes that's worth more than any inheritance. 6 months later, Marcus visited me every Sunday without fail. He brought me books, stories from his work, and slowly, carefully, he began rebuilding the relationship he'd thrown away. Emma never came back, and their divorce was finalized in the spring. Helena used part of her inheritance to pay for my care at a much nicer facility closer to the city, where I had my own apartment and could come and go as I pleased. The money I'd left her also helped her start a nonprofit organization advocating for elderly rights, something that made me prouder than any inheritance ever could. And sometimes on quiet Sunday afternoons, Marcus and I would sit together and talk about his mother, about the man he was becoming, and about the truth that it's never too late to choose love over convenience, family over perfection, and forgiveness over pride. That will never change. But everything else did. And in the end, that was exactly what I'd hoped for all along.